we're in an existential battle for the future of this country and this state. And there are so many things that are at stake. And my kids are 14 and 16. They're 9th and 10th grade. And right now, when I look at what's happening with the criminals on the streets, the open borders that the president's rightfully securing, but we still have a lot of damage we've got to deal with, the Islamification of Texas, the march through Texas that we're dealing with the mosques and what's happening. We need an attorney general that's ready to do battle to save this state. Because if we lose Texas, we're going to lose America. And so I feel called to come back to Texas and to defend Texas. Well, as I said a second ago, former federal prosecutor, I've prosecuted bad guys. Someone who was the first assistant attorney general. I ran the agency under Kent Paxton. And so I've been a lawyer, I've been in the trenches. Some of my colleagues have not. And I've also been in the thick of the battles, and I think that matters. I think it matters when people say, well, people ask you, what's the thing you're most proud of? And what I tell you is, it's that most people, when they talk to me, they say, well, I agree with you most of the time, but I don't necessarily agree with you every time. But I know you're fighting for what you believe in. I know that you're fearless. I know that you do what you think is right. And that's what you need more than anything in someone who's the attorney general, because you're not always going to agree with the governor or lieutenant governor. You're not always going to agree with the president or something else. And you got to follow the Constitution, follow the law, and do what's right for the people of Texas, and do it fearlessly. So I think that's what qualifies me. I've got a track record. People, a lot of people throw a lot of things around there when they're campaigning. They say I'm a conservative. I've got a pretty unassailable conservative voting record.
Yes.
Put my name behind my stuff. And I've also, got a really high record of support for President Trump. And I think that matters. He's the president. I've got the highest rating of any Texan. I've got the second highest of any member of of Congress in terms of my score as it relates to the GOP platform and supporting the president. I think that matters. Yeah, it's a great question. It's something that has been front and center for me for a long time. The first thing you got to do is be willing to call it out. And I've done it, and I did it long before a lot of other people were. It's getting kind of popular to do it now. I gave a floor speech on the floor of the House of Representatives a year and a half ago. My office got inundated with hate from CARE and other organizations because I was calling it out.
And you must have been doing something right.
Well, that's what I think, right? I've introduced legislation to make sure that we vet people for adherence to Sharia law. I've introduced legislation to pause immigration until we actually insert that provision to stop people from coming in who are adherent to Sharia law. I've introduced legislation to take the tax status away from CARE. I've talked to the Treasury Secretary and the President about it. We're working right now to root out the NGOs and follow the money. And as Attorney General, that's what I would do. I would work with the vast network of people that I have in the administration and the Treasury Department and the Department of Justice, and also fellow attorneys general across the country that I've got relationships with. We've got to band together and we've got to stop it. And you can't be afraid and let people hide behind the Constitution and the First Amendment, because it's directly in conflict with Western civilization and the Constitution. We got to use every law under the books. The legislature passed the law. You got to use the Deceptive Trade Practices Act. But mostly, you got to be willing to call it out. You can't be afraid to do it, and make sure that people understand that this is a well-funded attack on our way of life. This is not just a few people wanting to come here. It's purposeful. And if you think Dearborn, Michigan, and Minnesota aren't coming to Dallas and Houston, you're mistaken. If we don't have leaders, they're going to stop it. Well, first of all, one of the things that I think is critically important, you got to look at people's track record, right? Over the last 20 years, I've done a number of things. I've worked on the Article 5 Convention of the States. I've been out there advocating for what we can do from a constitutional perspective, been out there fighting to secure the border long before other people were. This last year, as part of the Lake and Riley Act, I got a provision put in that bill that will allow Texas to sue the federal government if they fail to secure the border in the future. My point being, you've got to be able to look, especially as Attorney General, at the ability to challenge the federal government and not assume that everything's hunky-dory because President Trump is now doing the right stuff. Because at some point, we're going to be faced with another Biden-Mayorkas situation. So that brings me to answer the question. Texas has to be willing to say, we're not going to be told by a federal government that we're going to be unsafe with unsecure borders, with lacking sovereignty, because you're failing to uphold your end of the bargain when we joined the Union in 1845. We have to be willing to say that. It's actually incumbent upon us. And frankly, I think we were too slow to declare an invasion as a state. I think we should have declared it.
I agree. We were 2 years too late.
Way too late. And by the way, I was calling for that and publicly calling for it. And I think we ought to have done it. And I think we need leadership that will do that in the future if we're ever put in the same circumstance. Yeah, it's an interesting thing for those of us who are pro-life. And I've got, strong A+ ratings, all the stuff, done a bunch of support in the life community. But we've been patting ourselves on the back as we've been working to defund and dismantle Planned Parenthood. And I'm proud that we've been doing it. And I'm proud that we included that in the big, beautiful bill, which took a lot of work to get done. But that's kind of like being proud of getting rid of the horse and buggy right at the time of the car, because it's mifepristone and it's these drugs that are the new way of abortions. And right. We know it. So if we don't address that, if we don't declare our sovereignty, again, this is a sovereignty issue. The people of Texas, the Attorney General has to defend the people of Texas. If we say we do not want mail order abortion drugs coming into our girls' dorm rooms or apartments or in their lives and endangering them, then we should do something about it. So yes, the Attorney General must enforce Texas law and enforce sovereignty of Texas to prevent the use of the mail systems in commerce to send what is basically a deadly drug. It has led directly to the death of many women across the country and in Canada and other places around the world. So we've got to address that issue.
To the Muslim country.
Well, what's interesting is, like, if you go look up in Minneapolis and in Dearborn, you don't find any abortion centers down there in the Muslim communities because they're not doing it. But you see it all out in the white suburbs, right. And that's what we're dealing with. And so we've got to be standing up for life and defending the innocent life, and I would be doing that with the full force of the Office of the Attorney General. Well, sure. I mean, I think that's actually really important here. It's something I bring here is the experience in the courtroom, experience as a prosecutor, experience running the AG's office, which my counterparts do not have. But also, I bring now 7 years of federal experience as a member of Congress, 2 years as Ted's chief of staff, etc. I've got deep relationships in the White House, in the Department of Justice, in the Department of Homeland Security. My former staffers that are now pretty high up, very good friendships and relationships. I think I have pretty much every secretary's cell phone number, and we're talking almost every day. You got to have that relationship to be able to coordinate. In fact, the last conversation I had with the Secretary of Treasury, and I'll be a little careful because it's a private conversation, but we had a very specific conversation about the need for attorneys general to be backing up and working with them on what I described earlier on this war against the network of radical Islamists and Marxists who are at war with our country. The Trump administration gets it. They need allies in the states. They need AGs that are going to go to war to serve right alongside them to do it. And I've got the deep relationships to do that. That'll be, frankly, the core thing that I think I'll be able to do as Attorney General is leverage those relationships for swift action and organized action in a coordinated way on the border, on the DAs that are putting criminals on the streets, on the network of leftists, and the Islamification of America. Those are the front and center issues we got to address.